Hi everyone. Let's start with biomechanics. So it's the part one of the basics. So understanding the principles of biomechanics and orthodontics is akin to learning the fundamental alphabets of a language. So just as the alphabets are the building blocks of a language, biomechanics forms the foundation upon which the orthodontic treatments are based. So let's make it simpler. Biomechanics is the study of structure, function, and motion of mechanical aspects of biological system. So in orthodontics, biomechanics is the study about the orthodontic force and force systems generated by different appliances and its effect of tooth movement. So, understanding the biomechanics is essential to determine the working of an appliance system and planning a force system to bring about necessary tooth movement and, more importantly, avoid the undesirable changes associated with it. Let us begin by talking about center of gravity. Have you ever thought about how gravity works? It's fascinating to think that it's the force that pulls everything downwards and towards the center of the earth. But sometimes things don't always work that way. In fact, sometimes gravity can cause things to topple over, especially if they are high up and not balanced properly. Tightrope walkers are the perfect examples of this. So they entertain us by wobbling from side to side while walking on a high wire, yet they hardly ever fall. This is because they have a deep understanding of the physics of forces and how to keep their center of gravity right where it needs to be. So, if you can grasp this simple concept of center of gravity, balancing anything will be a piece of cake. So will be orthodontics. Now coming on to center of mass. So the center of mass is a point at which the mass distribution is equal in all the directions and it does not depend upon the gravity or gravitational field. So center of point or center of mass is a point through which an applied force must pass for a free object to move linearly without any rotation, as you can see here. Are both center of mass and center of gravity same? The answer is not always. So it's common to assume the center of mass and the center of gravity to be the same, but this is not the case. So what is the difference then? The center of mass is a point at which the mass distribution is equal in all direction and it does not depend upon the gravitational field. The center of gravity is a point in an object where the distribution of weight is equal in all direction and does not depend upon the gravitational field. However, an object's center of mass and center of gravity lies at the same point in a uniform gravitational field. So, in this figure, the object on the left is in a uniform gravitational field and has an overlapping center of gravity and center of mass. So, for the object on the right, the gravitational field is stronger towards its base. So, the center of gravity is below the center of mass. Now coming on to center of resistance. So center of mass, as we discussed, is for a generic free body. So tooth is not a generic free body and it is connected by periodontal support with the alveolar ligament. So the analogous to center of mass for a restrained body is center of resistance. So the center of resistance varies between different teeth and different groups of teeth to be moved. So the serous of a tooth, so center of gravity is called the serous. So the serous of the tooth is usually located slightly apical to the center of gravity, that is the CG or the center of mass. So the periodontal structure surrounding the tooth root cause this apical migration of the serous. Now coming on to the next concept. So when a force acts on a body at its center of gravity, that is its CG, it causes, so it can either be CG or center of mass. So uh, here the center of resistance, so it causes the body to move in a straight line, as you can see here. So this type of fold is or force is called a centric force, and it has its line of action passing through the center of gravity or center of resistance. On the other hand, an eccentric force or a force acting away from the serous of a body, So as you see here, so serous is here, and a force that is acting away from the serous of the body, it will not only cause the body to move in a straight line, but it will also exert a turning effect on it, known as a torque. So in other words, this force can also be called as a momentum. So the amount of moment acting to rotate a system is found by multiplying the magnitude of force. So as I was saying, the amount of moment acting to rotate a system is found by multiplying the magnitude of the force applied. So this is the magnitude of the force applied by the force arm distance. So the distance between the center of resistance and the direction of force, which is the d. So it is often measured in newtons, and force is measured in newtons and d is measured in millimeter. So in this picture, the moment of force is equal to the magnitude of the force applied by the perpendicular distance from its line of action to the center of resistance. Here, so uh, here, the direction of the moment of force can be determined by continuing the line of action around the center of resistance. So, if the force is indicated by straight arrows, moments can be symbolized by curved arrows. Now coming on to couple. So couple is a form of moment. It is created by a pair of force that have equal magnitude but opposite sense, which is nothing but opposite direction to one another, with non-coincidental line of action, that is the parallel force. Because the force have the same magnitude but are oppositely directed, the net potential of this special force system to translate the body upon which it acts is nil. So there is only rotation. In simpler words, there is no change in position, or there is no distance covered by the body. It is just a rotational effect that happens in the body. So the translational effects of force cancel each other out, but the moments of each force combine to rotation of the force. So a force is applied here. So there will be so let's consider only the moment. So there is a anti-clockwise moment because of this force, and here if we see, with this force there is again an anti-clockwise force. So there is a bigger anti-clockwise moment that takes place. And couple, so the moment of a couple is also measured as force into perpendicular distance between the point of application of two forces, and it is measured in gram per mm. Now coming on to the next important concept, the center of rotation. So center of rotation, which is denoted as the red dot here, so is the only point that remains stationary with the moment. So in other words, in rotation, the only point that does not move is called as the center of rotation. The rest of the plane rotates around one fixed point. So the center of rotation is a fixed point around which a two-dimensional figure appears to be rotated as determined from its initial and final positions. Next, moving on to types of tooth movements. So as discussed, the center of rotation is the key to defining the nature of movement. Controlling the C dot, that is the center of rotation, automatically gives precise control over the type of tooth movement. When a single force is applied on a tooth, the tooth will move in one direction of the force applied, or will move in the direction of the force applied. Additionally, depending on the distance of the force from the serous, the tooth will experience a movement around the serous. So this combination of a force and a moment will cause the teeth to rotate as it moves, placing its C-rod slightly apical to the center of resistance. So a crown moves in the direction of force and the root remains in the same position. It is a very desirable type of tooth movement, which is nothing but the control tipping. So it is achieved by application of a force to move the crown and application of a moment to control or maintain the position of the root apex. So fixed orthodontic appliance systems like BEG and pre-adjusted edgewise appliance can generate controlled tipping movements. Now coming on to the uncontrolled tipping movement, this is the simplest type of tooth movement and it requires application of a single force. Here the tooth movement where the crown moves in the direction of force while the root moves in opposite direction. So the crown is moving here and the root moves in opposite direction. This is uh, this is called the uncontrolled tipping. Uncontrolled tipping is produced by labial bores and springs of a Hawley's appliance. Next, moving on to translation. When the root apex and crown move to the same distance and in the same direction of the direction, the in the same direction, the tooth movement is called as a translation or bodily movement. A horizontal force is applied at the center of resistance of a tooth will result in translation. Since the center of resistance of a tooth lies in the root and it's not practically possible to apply uh, the force through the center of resistance, usually a complex force system is needed to create a bodily tooth movement. So, a pre-adjusted edgewise system or straight wire appliance can generate bodily tooth movement. Now coming on to the next type of tooth movement. So, torquing. Root movement is otherwise called as torquing. So, root movement is achieved by keeping the crown of tooth a stationary point and applying a moment and force to move only the root. So root movement is termed as torque. It requires more than single force and it is best achieved with torquing springs of begs and pre-adjusted edgewise appliance. Now we will have to know about the magnitude of force that is required in different type of tooth movement. So the optimum forces for the OTM, orthodontic tooth movement, type of movement, for tipping we'll need around 35 to 60 grams of force. For bodily movement or pure translation we'll need around 70 to 120 grams of force. Root uprighting we'll need around 50 to 100 grams. Rotation we'll need around 35 to 60 gram. Extrusion we'll need around 35 to 60 grams. And intrusion we'll need around 10 to 20 grams. So the least amount of force is required in intrusion. Hope you all